Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice first piqued my interest when I saw an article in Game Informer about how Ninja Theory, previously known for action games like Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and the Devil May Cry reboot, was aiming to make a game about severe psychotic mental illness. Thing is, games generally haven't done that well. Not by their nature of games. If anything, an interactive medium is uniquely positioned to deliver a visceral and highly personal simulation of mental illness, but because our society in general has a lot of stigma related to these subjects, and art and media tends to heavily misrepresent mental illness in ways that only contribute to that stigma, to such a degree that terms like psychotic are far more commonly understood by their colloquial use as an insulting descriptor than the actual real-life mental conditions they refer to. Video games are, of course, no exception to this tendency, and my first reaction to the feature on Hellblade was hopeful, but also painfully aware of the fact that a mainstream action game is probably not the best place where this topic is explored. One of our biggest problems with portraying mental illness is how we tend to associate it with violence, and action games kind of do that inherently. Add that to the fact that game publishers like to make demands that interfere with the creator's vision to make a game more accessible, and I was afraid the stigma surrounding these issues would combine with the tendencies of its genre to poison what was otherwise a promising foray into important topics that video games rarely cover. Thankfully, those fears were unnecessary. Ninja Theory self-published this one, so no publisher meddling here, and their absolute first priority was to provide a simulation of this experience, and they went to great lengths to ensure their work reflected the experiences of people who have actually lived through similar things. And the result is absolutely stunning. Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice is a stark, harrowing portrayal of severe psychosis that has a lot to say about what it means and how we, as a society, respond to it. The game is set in the early medieval period, where Senua, a young woman from a Pict village, journeys to Hell in order to bring back her lover, who was brutally killed in a Viking raid. And that's just about all I really want to say about how the story progresses. If any of this has piqued your interest so far, I seriously recommend just going and playing the game before even watching the rest of this review, because the less you know beyond this point, the better. Throughout the game, there are voices speaking to Senua. These were recorded using a binaural microphone, which is designed to accurately simulate 3D direction, and wow, does the sound design in this game deserve all the Game of the Year awards. Absolutely play this game with headphones, and if possible, headphones with some kind of virtual surround sound function. I have the PlayStation Gold wireless headset, and this game alone made it worth the purchase. It's a deeply unsettling and engrossing experience to have these voices whispering and crying and yelling all around you. One of the things that really makes this work is that Senua is not just a vehicle for simulating mental illness, but a fully realized character in her own right. Her psychosis is the focal point of the narrative, but it's not just about what it's like to be psychotic. Rather, we find out a lot about her past and about her view of herself, and we see her grow as a person beyond just being an object lesson for her mental illness. And here I have to give an immense amount of credit to Melina Juergens, who did the voice and motion capture performance for Senua. This absolutely must be seen to be believed. It might just be the most incredible performance I've ever seen in a video game. If she doesn't get all the acting gigs for this performance, there is no justice in this world. As for what the player does in Hellblade, the game is comprised of exploration and combat. Much of the game is spent searching the area for runes and navigating the environments to change how you perceive your surroundings and move forward. The game most resembles an adventure puzzle game at these points, presenting a number of environmental challenges. These relate to the experiences of people who have suffered from severe psychosis. The player will have to find shapes and presumably normal objects in the environment, or look at something from a certain perspective so that what looks like broken shards of reality coalesce into something real. There are also runes scattered around the world that trigger stories from Norse mythology, which serves as the inspiration for the hellscape Senua is navigating. These sequences are generally fairly simple, but paired with the game's superb sense of atmosphere, the tension provided by the voices in Senua's head, and the contextual fuel of Norse legends, they work really well. The other part is combat, which is simple but perfectly adequate and enjoyable. This is where Ninja Theory's past work is most recognizable, as the basic mechanics of combat are fairly standard and very fluid. You have your fast and strong attacks, blocking, dodging, countering. If you've played this kind of game before, you know the basic outline. The only thing that really sets the gameplay apart is that the camera focuses on the enemy you're targeting and does not move from them. So when facing multiple enemies, you have to be on your guard, constantly aware of where your enemies are and listening for the voices in Senua's head to warn her of an incoming attack. Some may find this frustrating, but it honestly worked just fine for me. It comes across as more of a different style of play than a mechanical weakness in my mind. But then, Hellblade is one of those games where once we start focusing on how fun it is to play, we're focusing on the wrong things. This game is meant to be engaging, it's meant to be compelling, it's meant to make us want to continue and experience the whole story, but its goal is to do that through its storytelling and atmosphere more than anything else. We tend to think of fun as the opposite of boring when we talk about video games, implying that anything that is not fun is boring. But that is a severe oversimplification of how this stuff works, and rarely outside of video games do we ever utilize such absurd rhetoric. Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice is not a game I would often call fun, but I was never once bored with it, and it left me with an experience far more valuable than any fun I could have had with that same time. So there may be a few sequences of wandering around a little too long, maybe a frustrating battle or two, but frankly I just don't think that's very important here. What is important is that Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice tackles a topic with a lot of stigma attached to it and pulls no punches in its portrayal. Now, I'm not the voice you should be listening to in regards to Hellblade's portrayal of severe psychosis. Everything I'm saying in this review is based on what people who have actually had these experiences have to say on the subject, because their voices matter more than mine on this topic. The game itself includes a documentary about how it was made with the input of experts and people who have experienced these symptoms, and I highly recommend watching that if you want to know more. I'll also include a few links in the description to other resources if you want to know more about that perspective on the game. But I will say that while my perspective on the game's portrayal of psychosis is limited to what people more experienced in the matter have said about it, I do absolutely appreciate what Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice has to say about the stigma surrounding mental illness. I won't give away how it gets to these points, because I'm already honestly giving way more spoilers than I would prefer, but it very clearly paints Psychosis as something that doesn't affect Senua's worth as a person, or her ability to live a normal life. It doesn't even treat her perception of reality as particularly less real, or invalidate her experiences in any way. This game isn't about Senua overcoming her mental illness because it doesn't portray it as a bad thing that needs to be cured. Instead, it places the blame for the darkness she has fallen into squarely at the feet of a world that misunderstood her and persecuted her for her differences. The way it does this paints a poignant picture of how we cause suffering when we surround these people with stigma and ableism, which is probably the most important thing that people like me, who have never suffered any severe mental illness, can take from what Ninja Theory has accomplished here. Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice is the kind of game that I'm sure isn't for everyone, but that I would recommend everyone to play anyway. This isn't about whether you like action games, or whether the game is mechanically perfect. It's about an achievement in portraying stigmatized mental illness in a way I've never seen before. And in Games as Lit 101, Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice gets an A+. Thanks for watching. Many thanks to Aaron Scheidley, who bought me a copy of Hellblade: Senua's Sacriice. I've included in the description a link to his Twitter feed as well as a Monster Factory fanfic that he's been working on. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out some of my other videos maybe, like my educational videos or my long-form analyses. You can also check the description for links to Games as Lit 101 on Facebook and Twitter, as well as a link to Patreon in case you like what this show's doing enough to support it and help it keep going. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.